it was just the darkest moment of my life. And I had also just graduated. I was living at my brother's condo and I just felt so disempowered. I felt so hopeless. I didn't know how to do YouTube full time. I didn't know if it was gonna work out. I didn't know if I should do corporate. Just so much uncertainty. I remember I really wanted to move to downtown. When I looked up the rent, I was like, oh my gosh, like that just seems impossible. Like I'll never get there. I'm so worthless. And then all the while, like my relationship, though it had ended, it was the messiest breakup of all time. Hello, welcome to the first episode of my new video series, Get In Loser, We're Going Self-Actualizing. This is a video series dedicated to all of our inner journeys, the inner work, growth, and transformation, all the things that I love. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to walk away with not only just hearing my personal story and development, but a physical evaluation and mapping of your own life journey and your own life chart. And you'll be able to walk away with some journal prompts that I personally use to process my own feelings. All of that's going to be linked down below, so be sure to check that out. But without further ado, get in loser, let's get self-actualizing. No, let's go self-actualizing, whatever. Let's go into it. What is self-actualization? It is at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, who was an American psychologist, and I'm not too familiar or like concerned with that hierarchy of needs. I just always like the concept of self-actualization, hence this series. And so I just pulled up a definition, a dictionary definition. Self-actualization is the realization or fulfillment of one's talents and potentialities, especially considered as a drive or need present in everyone. The key to change truly is self-awareness. The only way you can really unlock self-awareness is by being completely 100% no bullshit honest with yourself. So often we use certain excuses about why we're doing something and we're not being honest. I don't have time to do this, when in reality the truth could be that you just procrastinate all the time, that things aren't a priority to you. Self-awareness requires honesty, because honesty requires that you take your power back rather than being a victim of your circumstances. Transformation overall is a perspective shift. That's what it is. The way that you perceive your reality and your world is often the cause of both your suffering and your joy. So are you a victim to your circumstances? Does life happen to you rather than for you? Or do you have power? There are levels of consciousness, and so oh gosh, this is so much. Anyways, in that we're living in levels of consciousness, and level 1 of consciousness is victim mentality. Life happens to you, and I'm gonna go over this, but basically, I wanted to start off with two concepts. I first heard them from Dr. Michael Beckworth. Basically, the two concepts are Kensho and Satori. So Kensho is the concept of growth from pain or suffering. And I think we've all had these moments in our lives where it is pretty much like a tectonic shift. It's like an earthquake in your world, and like everything has to change because it is that catastrophic. So a lot of times this can be like, for example, losing a parent, losing a loved one in general, getting fired, having no money, going through really crazy financial hardship, going through a really intense, emotionally tumultuous breakup. This is pretty much the universe kind of giving you tough love. It's like when you hit rock bottom, and the only way from rock bottom is up. So you are forced to change and forced to transform and grow, because otherwise you're going to be just at such a low vibration at a low point in your life. So if we were to put this on a graph, it would be a sharp, deep decline. It would be just a plummet. After, the big tectonic shift or kind of your world collapses, there's a window of hindsight where you look back and you're able to really evaluate and kind of reflect on like what happened to kind of come to that moment. Like what were the catalysts, and how to make sure that never happens again, and how to grow from it and really change. And as you recover from Kensho, it's kind of like a small incline as you kind of learn new things and adopt new mentalities and adopt new ideologies and beliefs that kind of get you out of that place, right? Because you just drop so deeply. And Kensho is important because, you know, most of us do learn from great catastrophic change. And I feel like right now the whole world is kind of going through a Kensho moment. It's just like deep catastrophic change, and we can only go up from here, hopefully. I think the huge takeaway from Kensho in general is it teaches you that you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to things. And it really allows you to take responsibility and ownership of your own internal world, right? Because that's the only thing that we truly have power of. Kensho forces you to really work on your inner world and how to channel deep pain into growth, because it's so painful. All right, so the second one is Satori, and Satori is growth from insights. And if we could put this on a graph, that was a lot. If we could put this on a graph, it would really truly be like small, slight upbursts in the graph. And this is kind of like, you know, just a little bit of new insight every single day. And these can come to you, you know, moments when you're meditating, when you are taking a hike, or when you're listening to a song and you just have this new insight or this great new idea, and things can really change from up there. And this is definitely a lot more, I think, chill. It's a more chill way of growth. And it's pretty much the idea that, you know, if you can only, Satori moments come from, you know, moments of peace and calm and tranquility and stability, in the sense that the more that you eliminate and the more chaos of your life is reduced and eliminated and simplified, you can experience these moments. So through meditation, through creative visualization, through moments in nature, just these can come up at any moment in your life, and suddenly you just have a great idea or just a whole new perspective shift, and you don't necessarily have to go through such catastrophic change to experience them. And it is said that over time, if you are still consistently seeking growth, you will eventually start to have more Satori moments, or growth from insight, because you're not waiting till you hit rock bottom to find growth. You're actively kind of seeking growth all the time, and that's like by self-improvement books, by podcasts, and you're always kind of evaluating where it is that you need to grow and transform, rather than waiting for something terrible to happen. And I feel like that's kind of like where I'm at in this state of life. When you invest in yourself and growing yourself, Kensho kind of declines and Satori increases. And if you could write, you know, so I did this whole graph thing of Kensho and Satori, and by the end of this video, I'll have you be doing that as well. So I guess just to kind of start off this series, I wanted to self-reflect and just go over kind of my own evolution and all my own inner journey of what's been happening the past 4 to 5 years. So much has changed, primarily within myself and primarily with how I see the world and how I navigate this. I think a lot of you know that I recently gone to a year of therapy, which is so crazy that it went by so fast. I was on the fast track of becoming extremely emotionally unavailable. I had never understood the concept of dating emotionally unavailable guys, because boom, I was pretty much emotionally unavailable like all throughout my high school and college life, because I think we talked about it in Why Love is Hard, but I had an attachment style of avoidant dismissive. So it's like very self-reliant, independent. I have it linked up above if you would like to kind of explore more on your loving style. But yeah, so I would say 2012, it was the highest of highs, because I had graduated from UCLA, something I never thought I'd be able to do, and because so much of my worth and self-worth and self-value was attached to achievements and accomplishments, which is just all, you know, external validation. And I was ready to kind of like take on adult life. I was of course really anxious, but I was more, I think, wide-eyed or bright-eyed more than anything. Anyways, and then I also had fallen in love for the first time ever, which was like, whoa, you know? I would say like in my sophomore year, I had a Satori moment where a guy had been dating who I pushed away a lot. I pushed away a lot of people because I always was so afraid of hurt, and just like vulnerability scared the crap out of me, and I had repressed so much of my emotions just all throughout my life because of the way I was raised. I remember he said like he was trying to end things with me because I guess I was just so emotionally unavailable and pushing him away all the time, and you know, it's kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. You think people are gonna hurt you, so they end up doing that because that's how you act. And I'm not saying that, you know, everyone hurts you because you want them to, but in that scenario, that's what happened. And I remember when he was breaking up with me, he said, "You don't even let people close enough to hurt you." And I was like, what? And I was like, well, I thought you were gonna hurt me, and you did anyways. That was kind of like my mentality. And so that was like a Satori moment of like when I could even understand that I was emotionally repressed. Anyways, so I fell in love senior year of college with my first boyfriend, my first relationship, and then we broke up. And in that relationship, I could do so many different videos on, and I do on relationships, and like I have so much insight on why things didn't work, but I think a lot of what you didn't see on YouTube, and I think that's why I'm so protective over my relationship now, is I know what it's like to put an aspirational relationship but have it be so extremely toxic. And you know, I think toxicity is a two-way street. I think so often people talk about, you know, she did this to me, he did this to me, but you know, it's an ecosystem. I think like strength now to me is not necessarily about, because I had this like thought that strength is being able to tolerate what happens to you, but actually now I have a different mentality around strength. It's being strong enough so you don't even have to tolerate, so you don't even have to be in the presence of negativity or toxicity or abuse or manipulation. Strength is like learning and knowing that you don't even deserve to be in that atmosphere, and you put up stronger boundaries. And I think I learned so much from my relationship. As soon as we broke up, which was shortly after I had graduated, I had a huge Kensho moment. Like I was crying every single day. I was, up until that moment, I was like very much so, I don't know if anyone's ever seen The Holiday by Cameron Diaz, or The Holiday by Cameron Diaz, The Holiday with Cameron Diaz. Basically, she's like this like high-performing executive, and like she's really uptight and she can't cry. Like that's her whole thing. She like wants to figure out how she can cry. And before my relationship ended, I took a lot of pride in never crying. I was emotionally unavailable. I wasn't there. I couldn't be vulnerable with the community, and that was the first time I did Getting Personal with You, which was like I ended up crying, and I thought that was like so groundbreaking at the time. But for me it was like not only crying in general, but crying on such a public platform meant a lot. And so that's kind of like where just everything kind of just shit hit the fan. That was probably a huge depressive episode I'd ever been through, and I was going through suicidal thoughts, and I felt so hopeless, and I felt like such a victim. It was just the darkest moment of my life. And I had also just graduated. I was living at my brother's condo, and so I was paying like rent to live in his room, and I just felt so disempowered. I felt so hopeless. I didn't know how to do YouTube full time. I didn't know if it was gonna work out. I didn't know if I should do corporate, and so much uncertainty and darkness kind of loomed in that era of my life. And I remember I really wanted to move to downtown. When I looked up the rent, I was like, oh my gosh, like that just seems impossible. Like I'll never get there. I'm so worthless. And then all the while, like my relationship, though it had ended, it was the messiest breakup of all time. It was like consistently blocking and having other girls involved and messaging me. It felt like when I was single and alone, I was drowning. And then when this person came back into my life, I felt like I was at like the bottom pits of hell. That's how it felt, like genuinely. And I also felt super alone. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone. And at the same time, I had also broken up with two of my closest best friends at the time. So I was going through 3 breakups. I'd moved to a new place, was going through post-grad anxiety, grinding my teeth. It was just such a low moment in my life that I just had to say to myself, like, there's got to be more to life than this. This is when I will say that I was going through a huge spiritual awakening. I sought refuge in self-development books, podcasts. It first started because I was learning a lot about finance, because I was on my own now and I just wanted to make sure that my finances as a young adult were on top of things. And then I found Optimal Living Daily, which I listened to every single day, and then it eventually led to spirituality. It was also during this time where I was living paycheck to paycheck, and the ironic thing is that my YouTube audience wasn't that much smaller than it is now, but I was making like a third of what I am making now, solely because I was my own manager, and the way that I felt about myself reflected in the rates that I was charging. I was severely underpaying myself because I felt so worthless, and honestly, the way that I felt about myself that time really just kind of externally manifested around me. Boba break. So at this time, I was working paycheck to paycheck. I was working a lot because that was the only thing I knew how to do, was like show up to, I was making like 3 videos a week and just like really trying to make YouTube work. It was really hard for me to be in this condo, which my brother had bought, and it was brand new and beautiful, but everything seemed so miserable to me at the time because I felt like a loser. I felt like, am I just gonna live in my brother's room my entire life? I wasn't sure of how things were gonna work out, and I think most of the time when you go through post-grad life, it's written with so much uncertainty and like anxiety, and so I think that time in general is hard. But it happened to coincide with my first breakup, my leaving 2 best friends, so I had no friends at the time. I was in a new area. I was severely underpaying myself. I remember that my form of entertainment back then was like a joint and a bag of hot Cheetos, and that's all Diego and I ever did because that's the only thing I had money for. And I remember the first time Diego and I hung out, we actually went to Ralph's, and I bought $10 worth of a Chipotle bowl because I couldn't afford Chipotle at the time. Like, getting a $10 Chipotle bowl, it was just like out of my means, and it was just fiscally irresponsible. And I think this time was really awesome for me because I really truly lived with such little money and was so happy. And so it taught me how to be really happy with not a lot of money. I mean, I'm so much happier now that because I don't have to worry about money, and your girl can have Chipotle anytime she wants now. But this, looking back in retrospect, this Kensho moment was really awesome for that, because anything other than this amount of money made me realize like, oh, it's excessive, like I don't need it. And so this was the time that I also met Diego, who is like someone I consider just like a soulmate, a platonic soulmate. And I had also hired my first intern, which was Rainalyn, who, like, looking back now, like, she is a soul sister. The 3 of us are a part of a soul family, and we have 100% encountered our souls in other lifetimes, and it's so awesome that we could meet once again in this physical realm. So I was just reading a lot, learning a lot about spirituality. I would say at this time it was an awakening. So Kensho was like, you're awake now, like you see the world completely differently. You are starting to have a huge perspective shift. I was also a new dog mom, so I had never been raised with a dog, so then like having Comey, and then dogs are really expensive, especially if you want to take care of them right. It was a lot. Like I learned so much about how to become a dog mom. I had so many breakdowns because anytime she did something wrong, I thought it was a reflection of my own self-worth and my ability to be a parent. When I think back on this time, my heart still aches because the pain and the suffering, it's like I feel if I just tap back into that place. And I don't try to tap back into that place often just because 2017 to 2018, I would say this is more full of Satori moments. We're kind of shooting upwards. So I finally moved out into my own apartment in Koreatown, and I did an apartment tour, and I guess what I didn't tell you guys was that this apartment I had no idea was just awful. Like I used to get messages saying like, oh, where did you live? It looks so nice, like I want to live there. And it was actually only until I moved to downtown that I realized how much I kind of like lived with. And I'm not the type of person to complain, but I think I made it a lot nicer than it looked. And it was I have a thing for historical buildings, but basically it was built in 1908. My unit was renovated, but I am not someone who leaves like dirty dishes and food and like food droplings everywhere. It's a pretty clean countertop, but when I would leave for just 1 or 2 days to San Francisco, there would be a huge infestation of cockroaches, like a mound of baby cockroaches every time near the sink, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. And I'm someone who had so much privilege. I had never seen a cockroach until I moved to K-Town, and I was suddenly living in a cockroach infested apartment. And one time I saw one scurry over my pillow. I called my friend. I was crying, and after I honestly left K-Town, now I see cockroaches like, hey, like it got to a point where they were all over my apartment that it didn't matter to me. Like, we fumigated my place twice, but you have to take out all your furniture, and just like I wish I vlogged all of this, but I felt like there was so much toxic shame in all of this, and still this period of my life. And so because of the toxic shame and like I think optics, just wanting to kind of like exude this lifestyle of aspiration and like, oh, I'm an influencer, because I was still very much so in that mindset. I was like, oh, I want to be an influencer, I want to be a like successful YouTuber, whereas now it's like completely different and shifted for me. Also, I would say during my Kensho moment, that's when I started to release a lot of like anger and resentment, was able to find like compassion and vulnerability within myself, because oftentimes when people can't hold space for others, it's because they can't hold space for themselves inside, and I could not hold space for anyone, and that I sure as heck did not. I could not hold space for myself at the time. So during all of my awakening, I was starting to not only honor my feelings, but also really kind of allow myself to just like go through them. Like, I remember I had a moment with Diego at 4 a.m. and I was doing so much emotional eating, binge eating. And I went to go get carne asada fries at 4 a.m. with Diego, and it was because like the pain and the loneliness and the deep low self-esteem and self-worth that had kind of got pushed to the surface after my breakup. Like, it was always there, but now I was like, oh, I can't ignore this anymore. I can't like distract myself. I can't repress anymore. It came up, and I remember saying, Diego, like, what do you do? And this is like, granted, we're like only friends for like 3 or 4 months, and Diego goes, I was like, what do you do when you're sad? Like, I was freaking out. That sadness and just this heaviness kind of felt so pervasive in my life. Like, it's like anything I did, anywhere I went, I was just so immensely sad. And then Diego just looked at me and just was like, feel it? And I still have that moment in my journal where I'm like, Diego said something so transformative to me. It was like, feel your sadness. Like, because that was such a foreign concept up until that point. Oh, I also got this palette. It's so pretty. I'm also in an era of my life where I love color. Like, I just want color. I want like sparkles. I just want to be really aggressive with it. When Diego told me to feel it, I think this was when I was kind of like going into level 2 of consciousness, where I was like, no, like, I am the creator of my reality. I have so much power in how I at least react to things. And I think so much of how I was reacting was like just constantly stuffing everything down, like stifling myself and not like giving myself the room and the space to feel my emotion. I actually remember right after my breakup, August 18th we had broken up, and then August 20th I had to go to Cancun. So I had to go to a 5-day Cancun trip and with my family, and this had been planned for many months before. And so even though I was in no headspace to go to Cancun, I acted so like normal. Like, I felt like my brother said that I was like screaming and shouting in my sleep, but then when we're on the tour bus, he was like, are you even sad about your breakup? And I was like, what? I said, yes, of course. Like, I feel like my heart's gonna like collapse and die. Like, I feel like so much pain. And he goes, really? He's like, why do you act so chipper and happy all the time? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you know what, you remind me of Kim Kardashian. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I saw this interview where she was walking down the red carpet, and she was wearing fur, and then all of a sudden as she was walking, she got powdered. Like, someone just threw all this flour in her face, and then she cleaned up and came out. And then they asked her like, how did it feel to get powdered by a PETA activist when you're wearing fur? Kim said, oh, haha, you know, I needed some powder that night, but I didn't expect it to be that much, and kind of just like laughed it off and went on her own way. And my brother was said, like, you're like that. Like, I would be so traumatized and embarrassed and hurt by such an action, but I want to just like take off the powder and just like walk on and act like nothing has happened. And then I was like, what? And that was another kind of like in my Kensho moment. I had never seen myself like that. I never had self-awareness for myself like that. But looking back, yeah, I was totally Kim Kardashian. I'm gonna try and put this blue shade here. To Koreatown. It was cockroach infested. It didn't have a parking space, so I had to pretty much park in the Bank of Korea. And because the area wasn't that nice, sometimes at night I would have to Uber home after I drove home. I had the worst neighbors. Like, when you cross the street, you could hear them verbally and emotionally abusing each other, just saying the most crazy, hurtful, abusive stuff. And I remember sometimes at like 1 a.m. at midnight, they would throw chairs on top of my ceiling and then go straight into loud, really crazy sex. And the sex didn't bother me. It was all the stuff that came before it. And so I would have to like take a walk outside and go like 3 blocks down the street to just get some fresh air until they stopped. And I kid you not, you could hear it those 3 blocks down. Like, they're so loud. And I asked all of my neighbors, I was like, hey, like, I got to know everyone. I was like, hey, do you hear this? And the guy was like, oh yeah, like when I first moved in, I thought someone was listening to Pornhub really loudly, and then I realized it's just our neighbors. And then they were like, yeah, I live on the 1st floor and I lived on the 3rd, and then they lived on the 4th, but I happened to be right directly underneath them. I had to get really accustomed to just like the water pressure kind of went out, and it was always extremely icy cold after 9 p.m. because it was just an old building, and I just got really accustomed. So you either sleep dirty or you basically take a cold shower. So I got really accustomed to taking a cold shower. It was like not a big deal. All of this with my awakening and all of this, I just had so much gratitude. Like, nothing could be as terrible as kind of how I felt in my brother's condo, just feeling like, you know, at this point I had not dated anyone, I had not touched anyone, but at this point I feel like things were finally kind of coming to an end, because I had like cut off all ties and modes of communication with someone that kept coming back into my life. Even if it was like my 500 square feet studio that was cockroach infested with terrible neighbors and like cold water, and these are just a few things. Like, the apartment had a lot of weird things. Like, these things, like, I didn't care. Like, I loved it so much because like it was mine, it was my own, and like everything I touched, like even this cockroach infested sink, I was like, it's mine because I paid for it. I would also say this is the era where I was pouring from an empty cup, like constantly giving so much, my time, my resources, my insight on everything I had learned, because everything I learned was so transformative and I wanted everyone to know it. And that's just kind of the person I am. Anything I learn, I want to tell people passionately about, because I'm like, everyone needs to know about this. So I had a lot of friends at this time in my life. In Koreatown, it was totally a new era. It was like difficult, but like just constantly a sense of like gratitude and deep reverence for life itself. Just feeling like, okay, like I can do this kind of, you know? I was making a little bit more money because I was like, okay, let's charge a little more, like, you know, let's get into it. I don't know. But yeah, so up until this moment, I hadn't dated. I was like super closed off to even the concept of dating because I felt like I didn't think I could go through it again. And this is with the idea thinking that like all relationships are this tumultuous and toxic. Friends had said like you have to get under someone to get over someone, and you know, just kind of the idea of like you're young, like go have fun, go date. And so this is the era where I finally started dating. I got caught up with a lot of weird people. I had gotten an STI, I got chlamydia, which I know the statistics now, like 75% of people under 26 get chlamydia. You take a pill and it's easily treatable, but that was such a low moment for me because even though I had identified so much with feminism and sex positivity, it's like brought so much more toxic shame onto me. It made me realize like, oh, there is a lot of internalized slut shaming that I have to like undo in doing this. And so kind of just took time to myself, and I did feel extremely lost in my career. It was at this time that I thought I wanted to really just like do something else. Like I wanted to go even become a barista. I just felt so like lifeless on YouTube, and the only thing that really truly helped that was me doing the AM with Amy. Like when I got to talk about makeup and talk about things I loved and what I was going through, that really helped me. That kind of was like my soul's work. Like I felt very happy doing that, and to this day I think most of my content has changed to that. And then this was also the time that Diego had left to Berkeley, so Diego was such a beacon of light during that time, and I feel like we had so much fun together. When we hung out, we could watch paint peel, we could watch grass grow. Those times in my brother's condo was just us constantly talking, giggling, laughing, just having such a wholesome time. Like it didn't have to do with anything. Like our internal realities just like matched and were in alignment with each other so much that anything we did was fun. So when Diego got into Berkeley, which was an amazing moment and such an amazing accomplishment, just knowing how just how Diego's life is and just all of the stuff that they've been through. Such an amazing moment, but I felt like the moment that I had made a friend, they kind of just like disappeared. When Diego had left, I felt like I was just trying to I was putting myself out there a lot. I was texting everybody I knew, asking everyone to hang out, putting myself on friendship dates, going on actual dates, which was draining all in of itself. And I feel like I met a lot of interesting people at this time. And then we come to, I would say, moving to downtown 2018 to now. I would consider this era called shadow work. After I had moved to downtown, I was definitely on the upward. I was on an incline. I was like feeling really good, but when I had moved here, I was very insecure and unconfident. But at this time, I was talking to agents, and having an agency really helped take off a lot of the managerial workload that I was going through, and just let me like focus on my content. And it felt so amazing to have like people on my side to like kind of negotiate for me, because everything I'd been doing was like alone for about like 6-7 years. And I remember when I moved to downtown, I had looked at a smaller unit that was a little bit cheaper, and then this much bigger unit for a price jump. But one of them was inside my budget, and this one was just slightly over. And at the time, like even my budget, it seemed like I was stretching it, and I was so terrified of just not making money and not knowing how to make ends meet, because I was again still charging myself a little bit more, but still so much less than what I should have been charging, because I had no idea about how to do YouTube full time. Anyway, so I was really worried, and then I was like, you know what, like, am I gonna go with the bigger unit or am I gonna go with the under unit? And like my logic and my practical side said you should go with the under unit, but then my intuition was like, no, you're gonna get the bigger one and you're gonna make it work. You're gonna make it work, and you're gonna outgrow this space, Amy. And you can't live in fear, and you just gotta do it. And so I ended up getting the bigger unit, and this is the unit I've been in. And it's crazy to say now that I can not only comfortably afford this place, but now I'm like going to somewhere where it's a little bit more expensive. But the apartment itself is a little bit more of like a downgrade. But that's just because of the area that I'm going to. But anyways, at this time I started dating people who were, I don't know, the circumstances were better. Like we were dating and I hadn't done anything physical with them unless I felt like it was safe enough. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just here to like drink and kind of hook up in a lot of ways. And anytime I'm drinking, I know that I'm in a low vibrational state, because drinking is not for me. I get physically ill. I'm not a party person. I hate loud environments. I hate clubbing. I just hate it. Like I love peaceful one-on-one time. I consider like deep introspection and getting to know one another. Like that's my type of partying. Even in college when I was like partying a lot, it was solely because I wanted to fit in. And I do feel like every time I drink, it's like because I want to fit in. Like if there was any time that I extremely wanted to conform, it's like when I go out and I try to like have fun that way. But it's just, my body can't handle drinking, and like I just hate the loud, crazy atmosphere. I'm like such a sensitive person that it's like just too chaotic for me. I'm also very chaotic inside. Anyway, I finally began dating one person for like pretty much in and out over the year, but this person was extremely emotionally unavailable, and I remember going through so much hardship, making everything seem as though it was my fault. Like I wasn't pretty enough, I wasn't smart enough, I just wasn't enough. And this was the time when I was really starting to understand that we pretty much attract not what we want, but the people that we are. The same vibrational frequency you're in, like that person's in as well. I kept making everything seem as though it was my fault. And I remember thinking to myself like, oh, this person is so emotionally unavailable. I can't be emotionally unavailable. And I was like, I'm not that emotionally available. I like to talk about my feelings, I cry. But the thing is, I was emotionally unavailable to think that that whole situation was because of me and my value. It was not. This person just had so much trauma and emotional issues to work through, as do we all, as did I. But then when I placed all of that onto myself as though it was like a reflection of my self-worth and self-value, that was where I was emotionally unavailable. And it was just so much crying. I think I spent pretty much the whole year like smoking so much weed, and I remember Diego and I would just like spend time together and cry and just talk about our feelings, because Diego was going through a lot at the time in Berkeley as well. I had such a beautiful place, and I had accomplished a lot of the things financially that I thought I never could do 2-3 years ago, but yet I was so miserable. It was actually when I had a breakdown right before I was off to a speech in Wisconsin that I decided that I just started breaking down, crying publicly in the airplane. I felt so terrible and I couldn't figure out why, and it was like uncontrollable sobbing. And then that's when I decided to just fuck everything and do everything for myself. Like, do whatever it is for yourself. And for me, I have always deeply loved tattoos. Like, my mom will tell you, I've been getting henna since I was like 5 on Venice Beach, the boardwalk. So I texted a tattoo artist and I started to book an appointment, and that's when I got this big piece and the komi. And then I went to Japan with my brother, and we had gotten to a really like verbally aggressive fight, and that just kind of made me go into a really deep depressive mood on top of with like this person that I was dating / not dating. I would say a lot of stuff came out again, and I was crying, and I had Googled, why do I cry when people are nice to me? And then I literally typed that in, and the first answer said that, I don't know, you should go to therapy. And therapy is something that I have always been intrigued by, and I've always been kind of like, what is it that they're getting out of therapy that I'm not, you know? I think the idea of expansion of the mind through therapy like was something that was always the pull. Like, I know a lot of people are afraid to hear like what's wrong with them, quote unquote, but I think that's just a stigma. I think we all have baggage or issues, because like this world is a very tough, and this is Earth School. Like, we've come here to learn lessons and to go through hardship, and human resilience is like the thing that keeps me alive and going, because like people are so strong through what they've gone through. So I knew therapy was really expensive, and then but with the addition of agencies, my like income had doubled, and people were just vouching for me in ways that I never knew I could, and work was really picking up, and I still felt quite lost about my content. But this was a time where I started to talk more about like self-development and spirituality, and I think still now I'm a little bit shy about my spirituality. Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, so I basically had another meltdown, and I decided I had to go to therapy. Like, I had the funds to finally go, and so I did a lot of research. I wanted to make sure I got the right one, and I've been going for over a year now, and I must say it has been the most exhausting, it's tiring work to unpack so many of your issues. But I would say this is the era of shadow work, because I started to really untangle all of my toxic shame by talking about the things I'd been through. I had not even identified with having trauma before going to therapy, and so many times she had told me, that's a traumatic experience, this is abuse, this is gaslighting, this is manipulation, and so many of these concepts that I had always heard but never ever identified with, because I didn't want to be a victim. But the thing is, oftentimes we are victims of our circumstances, but we are not a victim to this life. And I think it was here that I got to release so much of my shame and my guilt, and I'm constantly working through my shame and my guilt, and now I feel much more liberated to be able to tell people about the things I've been through. And granted, there's a lot that I haven't shared about my childhood. I also am not ready to on such a public platform, and I almost feel like I hope you don't have to hear about like my childhood to understand that I've been through painful moments in my life. This was a time where I was starting to go to women's summits. I went to the first Asian American Women's Non-Binary Summit, and I met such an amazing group of people. And I remember I walked into that place and I said, this is my audience, this is my community. I want to meet people who are doing things like this. And like fast forward like a year later, I am like good friends with both of the founders of that summit. And I was also going to family constellation workshops. I was doing a lot of inner work. I started really meditating daily, and I started to do breath work. I started to do somatic healing. I started doing other healing modalities that weren't just reading and podcasts and journaling. From going to yoga and doing it for more so the breath aspect of it instead of the working out and sweating part of it, and then also just reading so much more, of course, because I will always read a lot. 2019 to 2020, I feel like this is when I really started to feel conscious sisterhood, just finding other women in the wellness and self-development space that were so supportive and so uplifting. And then I finally stopped talking to that person, and I decided I'm gonna cut off all dating now. And then I had met my partner John, and when I was dating him for a month, I was like, I'm never gonna see this person again. This is like, I don't know what we're doing. Like, it's just like, but I had so much fun talking to him. We spoke to each other for like 8 to 10 hours a time, and we never got bored. And I could literally talk to him all day about so many different subjects. And I'm so well rested. I never knew that you could have such a stable and healthy relationship. And I do think that is why I'm so like content and happy in this relationship that it feels silly to kind of share that with the world. I don't know. Also, I think I have just so much like scarring with promoting a false narrative of a perfect relationship or an aspirational relationship. It's just, I hope that everyone can know that like healthy and stable relationships can work if you do the inner work, and you don't have to always live out your own old cycles and your old programming, because we're constantly just living in a cycle of a reality that was pretty much passed down to us, and we had no choice to it. Like, it was not our fault, but it is our responsibility to change and heal from that and choose better and to break the cycle. So yes, I've been able to happily claim my trauma, happily identify with it, and release it. It's no longer just shoved up in here and stuck in here, and there's a lot less shame in my identity, in the way I live life. And that brings me to now. I feel like it's just a constant cycle of Satori moments, just reading and elevating. I'm still doing so many different workshops and courses, and I feel very in alignment with my vision and my purpose with Seen and Safe, and just wanting to help people. But more than that, this new chapter in my life, I just signed a lease for next month, and this new era of my life, I have a very specific like vision and vibe. The themes are just slow and childlike. Like, the new place I'm moving to, which is still in Los Angeles, is a totally different pace and scenery than downtown LA. This era of my life, I am just trying to seek a lot of joy and play and laughter, and really trying to hone in on what it is that I've really loved as a kid. And as a kid, I remember I loved rollerblading, biking, swimming for hours on end. Loved arts and crafts. I loved painting, Play-Doh, clay. I made clay cupcake charms. I just want to like be under the sun, and I want to bike, and I just want to be outdoors a lot. Now I feel like extreme amounts of gratitude for anything. I feel like when I had first moved to downtown, I was grateful for the things I had done, but I was also feeling like strangely entitled to a lot of like happiness. Like, I was like, oh, I did all this, like, shouldn't I feel happy? Like, oh, people are like living their lives and they just seem so happy, like why can't I be happy? And I think that entitlement has just like, through lots of journaling and therapy, just talking a lot about it, it's something I'm constantly trying to undo, is like that sense of entitlement, and to like go back to the place of me being in that condo and just feeling so helpless with my life. I'm really excited for this new chapter of my life. I think this is downtown LA. I've been here for 2 years. This is where I became a woman. I think this is where I'm leaving a butterfly. I think the journey you know, I still get sad sometimes, but it's not ever feeling hopeless or like in despair. It's knowing that I am the creator of my reality and that I'm divinely protected, I'm divinely guided, and that I'm in control of what I want to do with this life, and that I am such a powerful being. So hopefully this whole thing, I don't know what you got out of it, but hopefully it could inspire you and just give you a little bit of background of what I was up to during the past 4 years. Even though I've been making videos, I just like didn't talk about what I was going through, and I'm sure this time in my life I'm gonna have a lot to say about it as well, but we'll check in like 3 to 4 years. But my next assignment for you is to do a life chart of your Kensho and Satori moments of the past 10 years. If you can go further back from that, and just try to be as honest as possible with yourself and just really get reflective about your own journey and your own inner journey. Yes, I guess I just want to say, like, it is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal and to change and to break this cycle and to choose differently for yourself. Thank you so much for holding space with me today. Thank you so much for hearing my story. I hope that you know what a powerful, authentic, true being you are, and to get to know yourself, you are an entire universe. And I will see you guys in my next one. Bye. It's so bright now.